painting miniatures with just one coat. With this premise and promise, Citadel Contrast revolutionized the tabletop hobby in 2019, spawning multiple competing products like the popular Speedpaint from the Army Painter. And now AK, best known for the 3rd gen acrylics, are coming along with the new quick gen paints. Took them long enough. Maybe even too long, considering the amount of competition that is already there. Well, I've tested all 80 quick-gen paints and I'll tell you if they were worth the wait. Can they outperform the others, or are they just another Me Too Contrast copycat? Hi, I'm Stahly from Tale of Painters, the bloke with a funny mask and a massive paint archive. For years, I've been testing all the major new releases in the miniature paint world, and now I've got the brand new quick-gen paints from AK right here. I commit myself to review as unbiased as humanly possible. So, a quick heads up, AK did send me and other selected painters prototypes during the development process and asked for our opinion. But I didn't get any compensation for that, nor am I sponsored by AK or any other paint brand. If anything, I'll be especially critical in this review because they will be sorry if they haven't listened to my feedback. Alright, here are the new quick-gen paints. I've got the complete set, which includes all 80 colors along with 20 3rd gen acrylics and some brushes for dry brushing. There are also plenty of smaller sets as well as individual bottles. But the elephant in the room is, did we even need quick-gen since we already have Contrast, dipping inks, instant color, speed paint and express color? After all one-coat paints are supposed to do the same thing. Create shadows and highlights with just one layer over a light undercoat. So can you really reinvent the wheel there? I mean, with so many established competitors, you've got to stand out somehow. For example, dipping inks from Green Stuff World are available in these huge 60ml containers, and Army Painter Speed Paint has loads of beginner-friendly paint sets and is now even available as markers. Make sure to check out my miniature paint markers video if you haven't heard about these. But AK's quick-gen come in these standard 18ml dropper bottles like everyone else. Might it be the price then? AK 3rd gen offers high quality paints for a very affordable price, as in Europe they're much cheaper than the popular Warpaints Fanatic. So to get to the bottom of the question about what makes quick-gen special, we need to dig deeper and take a closer look at the quick-gen range. There are 79 colors plus a thinner medium, which is significantly more colors than what Contrast and Express Color offer, and almost as many as Army Painter Speed Paint. There are even 6 metallic quick-gen paints amongst them, and that's quite something, as so far only the Army Painter has metallic one-coat paints in their lineup. I'm really excited to test these out in a moment, but first a word about the color palettes. As for all my reviews, I've tested every color individually and professionally digitized them. You can download this hand-painted swatch for free. You'll find the link in the video description and comment section below. As you can see, there's a great selection of vibrant colors as well as an extra military sub-range of uniform colors. The only thing missing would be some lighter skin tones and bone colors, but you can thin some of the darker colors with the quick-gen medium for that. In fact, many of the colors are very similar or identical to popular Contrast and Speed Paint colors, but there are also some unique ones like Reddish Flash and Vampire Flash. If you want to compare this with your existing collection, I recommend my 6-in-1 one-coat paint chart, which has all the colors from all 6 brands in one huge color-ordered graphic. If you already have the old 5-in-1 swatch, you can upgrade to the new one with all the quick-gen paints for free. Check out the description and comments for how. If you don't have it yet, you can find the 6-in-1 chart on my Patreon for a small donation, which supports my work and allows for future updates. A criticism often heard about the Citadel Contrast range is that the individual colors have such different properties. Some are quite thin like a wash, others are very dark and intense, while still others dry very evenly and create little shading. It's just unintuitive if you don't know exactly how a color behaves before buying it. Other one-coat paints like Speedpaint also have a certain degree of variation. But AK's QuickGen paints now found a solution to this problem. And it actually goes back to a suggestion I made when I tested the prototypes. Take a look here. Each color from the main range has an intensity rating from low to high printed on the bottle. Low intensity paints are somewhat more transparent, almost like a wash, similar to the lighter contrast paints like Pilar Glacier or Plaguebearer Flash, or like most Vallejo Express colors. Medium intensity QuickGen paints behave like the average contrast and speed paints, so a good balance between rich midtones and strong shadows and highlights. High intensity paints correspond to particularly dark contrast paints like Leviathan Blue, Cygor Brown and the Vallejo Express colors with the intense label. The rating is not perfect though. I found some of the high intensity colors behave more like medium intensity ones, but at least it gives you a general idea. There's one thing to keep in mind though, the intensity rating doesn't mean the same as opacity. Rather, it describes the depth of the tint. This is because QuickGen paints are free from additional white, opaque pigments. In other one-coat paint ranges like Contrast and Speedpaint, there are some colors with a high proportion of white pigment. You can recognize these by the residue that forms at the bottom of the paint pot over time. These opaque pigments are a problem if you work with pre-shading, for example zenithal base coats or dry brushing for the slap chop technique. This is because the bright opaque pigment will collect in the recesses of the model, which you want to remain dark. As you can see here, this can create a very unsightly effect. Since QuickGen is free of white opaque pigment, they are more transparent and perfect for slap chop. By the way, in my 6-in-1 one-coat paint comparison chart, I've marked all the one-coat paints with a high proportion of opaque pigment, so you can plan your paint schemes accordingly. Right then, so far so good, but I'm not entirely sure if the rating alone will make people want to chuck out their contrast and speed paints and switch to QuickGen. So now we need to test how QuickGen performs on a model and whether they can outperform the other competitors or not. For this, I grabbed one of my Stahly test models, which my mate Elf had 3D designed. I've simply primed it white, but you can also experiment with other light colors. While I'm applying the QuickGen paints, I'd appreciate it if you take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I know that 74% of you who watch my videos haven't subscribed to the channel yet, and yes, I mean you, so hit that button please. I'm always struggling with the YouTube algorithm, and your subscription not only helps the visibility of my channel, but you also won't miss any new developments in the field of miniature paints and hobby products. I test all the new paint releases, and often before other channels do. Okay, so my mini Stahly is almost finished and I feel the QuickGen paints flow very nicely from the brush. The consistency is comparable to Vallejo Express colors, I would say, and lies between the thinner speed paint and Citadel Contrast, which has a slightly higher viscosity. Of course, we're talking about nuances here, but I find that speed paint is sometimes quite runny and a bit difficult to control. Please let me know in the comments about your experiences, but I found it can easily flow into neighboring areas where you don't want it to go because of the capillary action. Games Workshop's Contrast, on the other hand, is easier to control as it stays more in its place, but as a result it sometimes dries a bit patchier on flat areas. For me, QuickGen is the perfect middle ground, similar to Express Color from Vallejo. However, with Express Color, I sometimes have the feeling that the paint doesn't pull back from the edges quite as well, which results in less pronounced highlights. QuickGen, however, has no problems in this regard and performs just as well as Speedpaint and Contrast. This test model has a lot of flat areas, which one-coat paints always struggle with, but I think the result is quite decent. The finish is smooth and slightly satin, similar to speed paint. I would say QuickGen is less glossy than Contrast, but not as matte as Vallejo Express color. Apart from the finish, there is one more very important characteristic when it comes to one-coat paints, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But first, let's have a look at the 6 metallic QuickGen paints. Up until now, the Army Painter were the only ones who've got metallic one-coat paints in their range, and there's a good reason for that. One-coat paints, like inks, are based on transparent dyes, and metallic paints contain opaque metallic particles. Now usually those two things are mutually exclusive, but the Army Painter have somehow managed to pull it off. However, it's been a while since the speed paints were released, and I'm keen to see if AK has been able to improve what the Army Painter started. And comparing them directly with the speed paint metallics, the shading effect of the QuickGen metallics is more pronounced. What's more, the results are more consistent, except for cold steel, as my bottle was really thick. With the metallic speed paints, the results vary quite a bit depending on the color. I found that some create noticeable shadows, while others stay rather flat. However, with QuickGen, the metallic effect is more supple in comparison, and the selection of only 6 colors is very limited. I'm particularly missing a bright silver. So which brand you prefer is really down to personal taste. I reckon I find AK marginally better because the results are more consistent, but personally I'd always go for proper metallic paints, as one-coat metallics feel too much like a compromise to me. But with a bit of experimentation, you can definitely achieve some cool effects. And with that being said, let's talk about the probably most important thing when it comes to one-coat paints. You might have heard the word reactivation in connection with the Army Painter speed paints. Actually, the term reactivation isn't entirely accurate, but more on that in a moment. What people mean when they talk about reactivation is whether the one-coat paint can be lifted off when dry or can even bleed through layers of paint applied over it. The first generation of speed paints from the Army Painter was very strongly affected by this issue, and I was one of the first to publicly criticize it. But as I've come to understand, reactivation is actually not the accurate term, as this effect is related to the curing time. The first generation of speed paint, due to its chemical composition, took a tremendous amount of time to fully cure, often several days or more, even though they were dry to touch. During this period, the paint could be lifted off with a damp brush or wet paint. While some painters creatively utilized this for blending techniques, most people, including me, found this quite inconvenient. The Army Painter listened to the feedback and managed to almost completely remove this effect with the second generation of speed paint. But how do QuickGen paints behave in this regard? Throughout my testing of the various prototype iterations, I paid particular attention to this aspect and gave a lot of feedback. So for the final retail versions of the QuickGen paints, I ran the following test. I dabbed various colors onto some primed plastic card here and manipulated them after 20 minutes, 2 hours and half a day of curing time. Test number 1 was the damp brush test. Even when the colors were dry to the touch, after just 20 minutes, they were already quite resistant, and only the orange-brown I managed to lift off a bit. After 2 hours curing time, it was hardly an issue anymore and completely gone after 12 hours. Then came the second test, where I painted over the dried QuickGen with a light grey acrylic paint. And you can see here that the light grey discolors again on the orange-brown, even after 12 hours of curing time. I mean, it shouldn't be a problem if you're painting over with a similar color, like a light warm brown in this case. But with light neutral colors like white and grey, you have to be a bit careful and maybe apply a coat of varnish first. All the same, I'd still rate the resistance of the QuickGen paints as quite good. The stability is a touch better than the current second generation of speed paints and is on par with Vallejo Express color. Games Workshop Contrast paints, however, are still the most stable one-coat paints. Once they are dry to touch, they are already fully cured and completely resistant to external factors. So the video's nearly finished and there's a lot to like about AK's new QuickGen range. Sometimes it pays to wait for others before releasing a product so you can learn from their experiences. I'd give them an 8.5 out of 10 score. However, I haven't found that one thing that makes QuickGen stand out from the crowd. Perhaps QuickGen is the sum of its parts, the well-balanced color palette, the competitive price and the above-average performance and stability. But which one-coat paint range is the best now? Well, let me put it this way, on a tier list, I'd put QuickGen quite high in the A tier. It's close, but they might even have a slight edge before Speedpaint. You can find out how I would rank the other brands like Contrast and Express Color in this video over on the right, so go watch this next to get the full picture. Thanks a lot and happy hobbying!